they're strong in the sense that they're not bucky. I'm not afraid of them. Yeah, I wouldn't even think you're at it. Because unless she understands that her stakes are very low. I'm not afraid of it. She understands that she doesn't have to take another 2 years, go to talk back now. Yeah, I wouldn't even try to do that. Because unless she understands that her stakes are very low. I'm not afraid of it. She understands. She doesn't have to take another 2 years, go to talk back now. Yeah, I wouldn't even try to do that.
Okay, we are up to Daf Mem Vav Amud Aleph. So I am going to change it off here. Okay, we are up to Daf Mem Vav Amud Aleph. Zok the Hedegruber, Chutz Min Adam. So we learned in the Mishnah that Dam is not subject to the Chi of Kares if you eat it when it's Tomei or when you're Tomei, and Dam doesn't have a Chi of Kares if you eat it when it's Noisar. So the question is, how do we know that? We know how to be effective. Omar Ula, Zakt Ula, Omar Kra, it says in the Pasuk, Vani Nasativ Lochem. So it says in the Pasuk in reference to Dam, it says, Ki Nefesh HaBasar, V'Damhu, Vani Nasativ Lochem. I gave it to you. Al HaMizbeach L'chaper Al Nafshoy Seichem, Ki Adam Hu B'Nefesh Yichaper. So there's 3 different drushes on this Pasuk. And the Gemara later on is going to show how each drasha is relevant. But one of these 3 drushes is used to tell us that Dam, there's no din noisha for it, there's no din tumah. But Ula actually is talking about Me'ilah. So Amula Amarka, Vaninis Hativ Lochem, Shalochem Yehei, I'm giving you the Dam, meaning there's no din Me'ilah on Dam. The Vega Bishmol Tana, Amarka L'chaper. It says, I'm giving you the Dam, Al Mizbeach L'chaper. So we learn L'chapar Nisativ. It's only for Kapar, but Loyla Me'ilah, not for Me'ilah. So the Rabbi Shmuel has a different limit from the same pasuk, and Rabbi Yochanan has a third limit from the same pasuk. Amakra hu, this ki adam hu b'nefesh yechaper. So we learn hu lefnei chapara k'la'achar chapara. The dam has the same status before the zrika as it does after the zrika. Ma achar kapara ein boy me'ilah. Just like after the zrika, there's no din me'ilah on any part of the carbon after the zrika sadam. Af lefnei kapara, dam before the kapara as well, ain't by me'ilah. So you have 3 psukim that seem to apply to me'ilah, but the Gemara later on is going to say that one of these psukim will apply to dam, will apply to tumah, and one will apply to noiser. So that's how we know chutz from the dam in our Mishnah. Zok the Gemara, how do you know when we learn dam hu? How do we know we learn that? So we learned that the dam should be the same before the zrika and after the zrika. Mehechet tells you to say that before the zrika it should be just like after the zrika, maybe pum fakert. Maybe after the zrika it should be like before the zrika, and there should still be a din me'ilah even after the zrika. Zok the Gemara, Eimal achar kapara is called lefnei kapara. Ma lefnei kapara yesh by me'ilah, af achar kapara yesh by me'ilah. Zok the Gemara, that's not mistaber, because it's impossible to say that after the zrika sadam, after the kapara, there should still be me'ilah. Why? Because ein loch davar shenasis mitzvasai. You never find any zach that the mitzvah is done like a carbon where the mitzvah is already done. umay alaboy, and you're still moil. So therefore, it's impossible to say that the dam you should be moil boy even after the zrika. Therefore, we have to say the achar zrika is kaidem zrika to tell you punkt figure. That just like achar zrika emay alaboy, so to before the zrika emay alaboy. You're telling me there's no such place in the Gans Torah where you find that even something who all of its avoidance were discharged and it's still usher? I'm going to give you an example of just such a thing. By Trumas Hadeshin, and Rashi tells us that by Trumas Hadeshin, it says V'samay Eichel Mizbeach, and for V'samay we learn that it has to be nignas there and it gets sucked into the ground there. Why? Because it remains also bana. So even though you've already done the mitzvah of Trumas Hadeshin, the deshin of which the mitzvah was already done on is still also bana. So why don't you say the same thing for the dam? Zok Gemara, you cannot say dam is going to be like Trumas Hadeshin. You know why? Mishum da Trumas Hadeshin ubig de kahuna shnei ksuvim abam kech. Big de kahuna says v'nicham sham. Again, you use the word sham to tell us, according to one shita, that those big de kahuna, the big de lovin that a kohen gadol goes into the kodesh hakodeshim with on Yom Kippur, they have to be nigna. They're also enough. So there, the mitzvah was discharged. The mitzvah is completely done. It's still awesome. So you have two such cases, and we know by Shnei Ksuma Bam Kechad Ein Malamdin. So therefore, you wouldn't apply this principle to the dam. Zok to Gemara Hanichal Rabbanon. You have Shnei Ksuma Bam Kechad like Rabbanon, the Army V'Nichan Sham Melamed Shetunim Geniza. That's if you learn that the big day kahuna, the big day lovin need to be nignaz because they remain asher bana. Elali Rabdoi said Amar Mutar saying the kohen hedyed. Rabdoi told these gadol can no longer be used as a kohen gadol. But for the kohen hedyed, they can be used. As long as they're not used again for a different Yom Kippur, Michael Amemar, you only have one pasuk. You have Trumas Hadeshin. So just like Trumas Hadeshin, even though the mitzvah was discharged, it's still also bana. Maybe dam as well. Zot Gemara no, because even if you don't have big huna, mishum davar Trumas Hadeshin ve'egla rufa shnei ksubah bam kechad. There's a third parsha of egla rufa where even after they do the mitzvah of the egla rufa, it's still going to be Asr Bahano. As Rashi quotes, Egla Rufa, it says, the Ksiva Arfu Sham, that Sham is extra to tell us Sham take Kvarasa, it remains Asr Bahano. Zok to Gemara, but we still have a problem. Because the whole Shnei Ksuvim Abam Kechat Ein Melamdin, Hanicha Leman Dharma Ein Melamdin. That's very good if that's what your shita is. That's Shnei Ksuvim Abam Kechat Ein Melamdin. We have a sheet who holds snakes who Malamdin. So I say, why don't you learn dam as well? Will be moil and dam even after the Shrika Michael Meimar. And for the Gemara, because by Egla Rufa and by Trumas Hadeshin, Tremu Tiksivi, there's a meat in the pasuk to say this halacha that it's also but not even after the mitzvah is discharged only applies here and not elsewhere. Hachak by Egla Rufa says Harufa, Dafka the Egla Rufa, and nothing else remains also after the mitzvah was discharged. Hazam Ksiv, and by Trumas Hadeshin says Visamu, it you should put, but not something else. Something else will not remain also bana after its mitzvah was discharged. So now we're going back to what we said before. We had Ula's limit from the pasuk. Ula learned it from Anisat Lachem, the Rebbe Shmuel learned it from the Chaper, and Rabbi Yosy learned it from who? But we have three limudim for the same thing. Zakhamar, why do you need three limudim? Utlosa Kroy Bidam Lamali, Zakhamar Limuute Meila, Minoisher Mitum. The three miutim tell us not only are you not moil in the dam, you're not going to be over als noiser, and you're not going to be over als tumah. Which means if someone ate noiser of dam, b'shoigeg, he will bring a chatos for eating dam, because there's a chi of course to eat dam, but he doesn't bring a chatos for eating noiser. The same thing if he ate noiser that was tameh, b'shoigeg, he doesn't bring a chatos for the tumah, but he brings a chatos for the dam. Abel pigel loitzar kra. Our Mishnah says that there's no din pigel for dam on dam, but we don't have a pasuk to be b'mayid. Zok Gemara, we don't need a pasuk because we already know the rule of pigel is that nan kol sheyesh leimatirin bein laodem bein lemizbeach, the emurin or meat of the Korbon that becomes nitar with this rika, that could become also to eat out pigel with a chi of kares. Chayavin alav mishum pigel. But the dam gufei materu. Dam is not a davar nitar. Dam is a matir. Vibal dam is a matir. It's not subject to becoming osher bano with a machshavas pickle. So therefore, you don't need a special pasuk. Three times the pasuk mentions by shlomim a chiyuv of currents. Three times it mentions a chiyuv kares for tumas by a Korbon shlomim. Let's see if I have the psukim over here. I don't think I have the psukim over here, but we're going to see the psukim on Amud Beis. So shloisha krisos b'shlomim lama. Why did we need three psukim by the parish of Korbon shlomim that talks about the chiyuv kares for tumah? So let's turn on to Mem Vav Amud Beis. Zok to Gemara as follows. Let's see the three psukim. The first pasuk is V'abazar asher yiga b'chal tamei lo yeyachel v'eishi sarev v'abazar kol tar yechal basar. So that's not one of the three psukim. That's talking about basar that becomes tamei, not a person eating basar with their tamei. Now you have three psukim. In Vayikra Zayin pasuk Chav says V'nefesh asher toichal, which is the pasuk immediately after the pasuk that we just discussed, talking about when the basar is tamei. Now we're talking about eating the basar shlomim when the person is tamei. V'nefesh asher toichal basar mizevach shlomim asher l'Hashem b'tamosei alav, and he's tamei. V'nichrisa hanefesh ahi me'amel. That's one pasuk. Then it says, oh, I'm sorry, the other two psukim are not quoted here, but there are two other psukim quoted by parshas by the Korbon shlomim talking about eating it b'tumah where there is a chiyuv kares. So frankly, why do you need all three for? Zoktimar achas leklal v'achas leprat. We read every day in the Baraisa of Rabbi Shmuel at the end of Kavonos. One of the ways that the Torah is nedreshes behen is kol davar shahir b'chlal v'yotzim in aklal l'lamed loy l'lamed al atzma yotza ela l'lamed al aklal kula yotza. So if you have a klal which applies to all korbanos, which is that if you eat a korban when you're tamei, you get kares. Why did the Torah now itemize shlomim? Why did the Torah speak on dafke shlomim? Why did it say shlomim? All korbanos are prohibited to eat when you're tamei. So that's called yotza min haklal. It was taken out of the klal to teach us something. And what is it teaching us? It's teaching us a rule agabe all korbanos when you're chayiv kares and you eat them b'tamosam. And zokt the Gemara. What do we learn from there? I'm on the fourth line of Rashi. Mal shlomim yuchadim kachim mizbech. What is shlomim? Shlomim is kachim mizbech. Meaning it's not tam kachim. It's ksushas aguf. That's where you have a chiyuv kares for eating it when you're tamei. I've called kachim mizbech. Masha'enkein other kachim like a ksushas b'dekabayis. If you eat that when you're tamei, there is no chiyuv kares and there's no chiyuv chatas. Gevaltik. V'achas, and the third one is ledvarim she'enam nechalim. The Rabbanan tells us that if you eat non-edibles like eitzim or levina when you're tamei, the Rabbanan in our Mishnah says that there as well there's a chiyuv kares. That's what the third time that shlomim is mentioned for. But Zok to Gemara, we have a machlokes in our Mishnah. Rab Shimon holds that you're not chayiv. So what's the third mention of shlomim by tumas aguf? What's that for? What do we use it for? To tell us that the chatois apnimiyos, if you eat them b'tumah, you're chayiv kares. Why would I think not? Why would they be different than any other korbanos? They are kedushas aguf. Yisal gedai techamina ha'il bar Rab Shimon. V'balt Rab Shimon said legabe pigel. Kol she'einoi al mizbech hachitzon kishlomim ein chayav v'nelo mishum pigol. If you don't spritz the blood of this korban on the mizbech hachitzon like a shlomim, you don't have a chiyuv of pigol ein chayav v'nelo mishum pigol. So I would have thought mishum tumenami lo l'chayiv. We should learn the same limud legabe pigol as legabe tumah as well. That if it's not like a shlomim, and you don't spritz the blood on the mizbech hachitzon, you're not chayiv if you eat it b'tumasai. Kamashulon, the third mention of the chi of karish for eating kachim when you're tamei, that it even applies to a chatas happening. Gaval. Zok to Gemara weiter towards the end of the Mishnah. Noimi Rab Shimon Mechayiv Eshudar Kilacha. We have a machlokes tanoim if you're mechuyev karis, if you eat kachim when you're tamei, and it's non-edible. So Zok to Gemara Itmar Rab Yochanan and Rish Lakish. Rab Yochanan and Rish Lakish had a machlokes, and you know who else had the same machlokes? Rab Elazar, Rab Yosy, Rab Chanin. Chad Mahai Zuzah. And there's different gersois, either Zuzah or Zuga or Zaba, but it means one of each of these pairs, Bechad Zaba, and one of the other pair. So basically, one of each pair says, okay, so one of them says this aloha. So let's see what it says. Chad Mahai Zuzah, Omri Chadam Hilsa, the inich trey chadam elsa. These one of this pair says one thing, and the other pair says another thing. So chad omar, chad mehai zuzah omar. One member of this pair says, machlokish shenechluku chachamim al Rab Shimon shechayiv. Where did the chachamim say you're chayiv even for eating a non-edible with tumah? That's only betumas basar. Avo betumas aguf. But if you yourself are tamei, divrei akoil einoi like it. There for sure there is no chiyuv. The whole shaila of when we say, the whole place where the Rabbanan say that if it's a non-edible, you're still chayiv. You're still chayiv. That's b'tumas basar. So for Rashi, im achlon la'etzim u'levaina tamein. The etzim and the levaina were tamei. There it's like you get malchus mishum lav de v'habasar sheyiga b'chol tamei. It says it shouldn't be eaten. So there is a lav. But what if the person is tamei and the items are tahar? Everybody agrees you don't get malchus. And the other mandamer said, the same way the Rabbanon are mechayiv malchus if you ate the item when it was the same way the Chachamim hold that you get malchus for eating the item that's tamei, so too the Rabbanan hold you get malchus if you ate the item while you were tamei. My time, what would the reason for that be? Because the two psukim are side by side. The two psukim that discuss either the basar being tamei or the person being tamei are one after the next. And even the karinibay, ba'abasar ashiyiga b'chal tamei, if you're considering a non-edible fits into the category of the habasar ashiyiga b'chal tamei, it will also fit into the category of v'tumas elav. So look at the two psukim. It says ba'abasar ashiyiga b'chal tamei lo yeyachel. If that's including non-edibles, then the next pasuk would be including non-edibles as well. So if the first pasuk is speaking about non-edibles, then the second is. It can't be machalik to say that dafka the first pasuk is speaking about non-edibles, but the second one is. That's one version of this machalik. That's Rav Yomi Masni Hachi. But Rav Kahana Masni Hachi, he had a different understanding of this machlokes. And yet chad ma'izuzah v'chad ma'izuzah, a seifa, they're arguing about the seifa, meaning chad omar machlokes b'tumas aguf. The whole machlokes is only by tumas aguf. Only there would the Rabbanan argue and say that you're I'm sorry. Only there would the Shimon argue and say that you're not chayiv malchus if you were tamei and you ate a non-edible. Avol b'tumas basar. But if it's tumas basar, if the basar is tamei divrei koyleika, even Reb Shimon would be moida that even a non-edible you get malchus. The Chad Amar, another sheet says kamachleikis bezu kach machleikis bezu. Amar Rabba mistaber command Amar kamachleikis bezu kach machleikis bezu. It's mistaber to say that it's the same. It's the same halacha that would be by when you're tamei would be by when the basar is tamei. Why? because my time, even the Karina baby to Masay love, the Nichasa, Karina baby Babosa Shiga Bahotomi Layel. Whatever doesn't fit into the category of one wouldn't fit into the category of the other. So the only difference between if you eat basar that's tamei, you don't get kares, you get malchus. And if you eat basar when you're tamei, you get kares. That's the difference. But as far what they apply to, they apply equally to tumas haguf and tumas basar because there's no reason to make a distinction between the two of them. Gewaltig. Now we were zoicha to the last line of the Gemara. Zog to Gemara, how could you say? It says V'habosar asher yiga, V'habosar is coming to be mar be'etim and levoina. So therefore, how could you say that somebody argues and says that you don't get malchus for eating non-edibles when the non-edibles are tamei, but we darshan the V'habosar is mar be non-edibles. Avada, that's not a real drasha. Midrabanan, they were makbid that if you had wood or levadi that was possible, they wouldn't let you use it, and they were soymechet on the v'abasar. But avada, we're not darshaning it 100% as a drasha, and therefore we're going to say that whatever is included in the iser and the chiv kares when you're a tamei is included in the lav when the basar is tamei, and it would apply equally. If either one applies to non-edibles, both of them will apply to non-edibles. Gewaltig. Zog the heilige Mishnah weiter. L'shem shisha dvarim hazavach nisbach. There's six things that the Korbon has to be shechted l'kavonos. Number one, l'shem zevach. You have to have kavanah for the right Korbon. You shouldn't have kavanah for the wrong Korbon. L'shem zeveach. You have to have kavanah for the right bailam. L'shem Hashem, you have to have kavanah to bring a Korbon to the Rebbeinu Shalom. L'shem Ishim, l'shem the fire. L'shem Reach, l'shem the smell. The Gemara is going to explain what those are. L'shem Nichoyach, l'shem bring nachas ruach to the Rebbeinu Shalom. The Achadas ve'Asham needs an extra kavanah. They need also l'shem chet. You have to have kavanah for the right chet in order for the Korbon to be maratz. Amr Yosy, Zok Yosy, af mi. Should not be. Even if someone didn't have any kavanah, it doesn't matter because it's a t'nai bezin that automatically makes the kavanah. Okay, gewaltig. Zog the Mishnah weiter. She'eine machshava hayleches ela achar ha'oived. The machshava, who controls the avodah. The person doing the avodah, not the owner of the Korbon, as Rashi says, Hirach ihava Omar. Let me just look at the gears here. It says ihava Omar. Ihava Omar. Shaloi l'shmoi. If the person doing this vicha has kavanah shaloi l'shmoi. Afagav the Bailim Amri Lishmoi, even though the Bailim says Lishmoi, Lav Midihu, the Bailim don't help. The Lav Midihu Tali Milsa, it's not Tali in the Bailim. Except Hamakrib Oisoi, Lo Yichashim. The Makrib is his kavanah is what's the most important. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, Zok the Heilige Gemara. Amar Rav Yehuda Rav, Oila L'Shem Oila. You have to be Makrib about Korbon, Oila L'Shem Korbon, Oila L'Fuka L'Shem Shlomim Doloi. You should not have kavanah L'Shem Shlomim. So that's l'shem zavach. Okay? Gewaltig. Ishim is l'shem ishim. You have to have kavanah that it's l'shem ishim. What does ishim mean? Lafuke kibaba, deloy. You have to have kavanah to put it on the fire and burn it to a crisp, not just to barbecue it. Okay? L'shem reach. You have to put it on the mizbeach and have in mind that it's going to create a beautiful smell. Now, while you're barbecuing meat, it's a geschmack smell. But once it's all barbecued and now you're just burning it, that's not a geschmack smell anymore. So therefore, you have to have kavanah l'shem reach lafuke evarim shetzolon v'helam. If you're going to first barbecue the meat and then put it on the mizbeach, there won't be a reach. That's not a proper eater. Delight. Yom Rav Yudah Marav Evarim Shetzolim Vehelam Ein Bahen Mishum Reach. They don't have a Geshmak Reach because the Reach already went out when the sizzle went out after you finished barbecue. Nichoyach, that's l'shem hanachas ruach l'Hashem. That's to give hanachas ruach l'Hashem. Who misha amar b'hayah. Now, being that Akiva just logged on, there's a beautiful sicha that explains this Rashi here. Hanachas ruach. Zot Rashi hanachas ruach. Nachas ruach l'fnei Hakadosh Baruch Hu. What the nachas? She'amar v'naser etzaynai. Hashem gave a tzivui and his rotzin was fulfilled. I believe the Lubavitch Rebbe is medayik. It doesn't say v'asina etzaynai. It's v'naser. It happened. His rotzin happened. I remember the Rebbe goes into a whole shtickle as to what the nachas ruach of a Korbon is at the beginning of Yikra. I think I learned the sicha with Akiva once. We learned it, but I believe that he references this Rashi. Akiva, if you're there and you remember, I wouldn't mind if you reminded me.
Yeah, hi. I didn't realize you were giving shir. I would have put the video on downstairs. You didn't give shir at 6 o'clock?
Of course.
You did, right? Oh, I didn't know. So you should, because I covered it because of the boys that are coming tonight.
No
But
problem.
I remember, if I remember recalled regarding the sikha, it just happens I'm looking through YouTube and I saw that you're live. But
Remember that sicha?
yeah, sure. I think the idea was V'naseh Ritzonu, we became the Rebbeinu Shalom's esrog. Doesn't it right? That in other words,
like his wife is Vanasa not Vasina returning.
correct. The only thing Rebbeinu Shalom wanted this done. The fact that it's us doing it was irrelevant. We were not part of the equation. The Korbon had to be given. If I'm not, I'm going to look it up again, but I think that was shot.
I remember it was a secret that I found very difficult to understand because he was getting into what hot for them the Rebbeinu Shalom market.
Right.
It was very
and
tough.
I think it became that sometimes he just wants it done irrelevant to us. That's what I think the upshot is, but I'll find it. I believe it's in.
But somehow we're involved in that, so that creates a nachas ruach for us. We benefit from it.
We benefit from the fact that we're doing it, but that's not the goal of the court.
The goal is not to make us do something. The goal is to get something done.
Done, right.
Okay, gewaltig. Zog to Gemara weiter. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Rav, Chato sheshachta l'shem oilo. If you shechted a chato l'shem oilo, at the chato shelo l'shema, we started the Masechta with that, Sula. But l'shem chulin kshera. If you shechted a chatos, l'shem chulin will be kosher. You think to yourself, that's why isn't that shelo l'shema? Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Rav, it's a gzeres hakos. Chato sheshachta l'shem oilo, Sula l'shem chulin kshera. Amar Rabbi Elazar, my time in the Rav, what's a svara? Because it says in the pasuk, "V'lo yichalalu es kachei b'nei Yisrael." You know what could be mechalo? Only kachei b'nei Yisrael could be mechalo. Kachim mechalal in kachim, vein chulin mechalal in kachim. Davka kachim could be make a chilul. So there, if you have kavanah to chulin, that is not a machshava hapoisalas. Masav Rabba, Frank Rabba, I'll prove to you that a machshava chulin will pass, because Amar Rabbi Yosy, af mi shaloi haya b'liboy l'shem echad mikolenu, our very Mishnah. Even if you didn't have kavanah for any of these, kosher, why? Shoot my bezin. But what did Rabbi Yosy say? If your kavanah was neutral, if you didn't have a positive kavanah for this, bezin takes care of it for you. But it's mashma if you had the hedja, a kavanah for carrot, it would be a problem. Time is shloi believe it klal. Ahoya believer l'shem chulun will be possible. Rab just said l'shem chulun is not possible. Amar Abaye dilma loy hoya klal kosher muratza. If you had no kavanah at all, that's kosher and it's muratza. It's a fully kosher Korbon. Ahoya believer l'shem chulun. It will still be a kosher Korbon because, as we said, l'shem chulun will passel, but ain't a meratza. Pazoy it's not meratza, and that's the dik that you should make from Rabbi Yosy. If you had it before shekavan the keneged l'shem chulun, it would not be meratza, but the Korbon would still be kosher. Amar Belazar, chatos sheshachta l'shem chulun. What if you shechted a chatos l'shem chulun? So I acknowledge this is a chatos, but even though I know it's a chatos, I'm the hedger having a wrong kavanah l'shem chulun. That's going to be kosher. Why? Because we just said that the ein chulun mechalin kachim. But if you had kavanah of mishum chulun, which Rashi tells us, you didn't even chap that this was a behema of kachim. You thought this was a behema of chulun, and you shechted it because you thought it was a regular behema. That will be possible. Not because of machshava shaloi l'shma, it's because of a whole new halacha that we're going to introduce now. The boy minei Shmuel merafuna, like Shmuel asked from Rafuna the following shaila. And let's turn on to Mem Zayin Amar Aleph. Minayin misasik v'kachim shupas. How do you know that if you're shechting, you're moving a knife around and the cuts kachim? How do you know that's possible? So that's not possible because you had machshavas psula. That's because you didn't even chap that you were shechting kachim. That's going to be possible. Shenever v'shachar is ben abakar lefnei Hashem. You have to shech. You have to know what you're shechting. You have to do it with conviction. Ad shetei shchita l'Hashem ben bakar. Amar lei. So he told him zubi adenuhi. We know this possible. But just because it says that once, we know by kachim, that means it's a mitzvah l'chatchila to have kavana and to know what you're doing. But where do you see that it's even possible to have it? La'akiv minayin. Amalei told him back, l'tzoinchem tizbachuhu. L'tzoinchem means l'daitchem, with consciousness, with conviction, you have to shecht it, l'daitchem zavichui, otherwise it will be a possible carbon. Baruch Hashem, we were zoiche to finish daf mem. Well, tomorrow we're going to learn Daf Mem Zayin with Hashem, and we're going to start the beautiful pair of Ezeu Mekayma. Awesome day.
I gotta list it on YouTube. So you didn't stream the morning shear, right? Obviously.
No, I didn't. I'll tell you why, because I couldn't get in. I couldn't get in because I have to I had to get a code that was sent to your phone, and I couldn't get the code. Now I didn't need the code because I logged in from my son-in-law's house. I was logging in before at 6 o'clock. I gave Shir off the Wi-Fi from my phone, but now I'm at my son-in-law's house, so he has his own internet, which Google already recognizes from previous times.
Got it. Okay.
Now, I hope I'm live streaming, because usually when I live stream, maybe if I stop to share, usually when I live stream, I could see it. Yeah, I could see it here.
Yeah.